In the medieval world, beauty was not just about appearance. It was about identity, morality, and social class, a silent language spoken through skin, hair, and posture. Imagine a world without mirrors, where reflection came only from rippling water or polished metal, where a woman's worth could be whispered behind her back based on how fair her skin looked in the candlelight. In that world, beauty was not a matter of preference. It was a declaration of who you were or who you wanted to be. Pale skin, for instance, was the most coveted trait in all of medieval Europe. It was more than just a look. It was a status symbol, the visible proof that you lived far from the hardships of labor, untouched by the sun and wind that marked the peasantry. In an age when your position in life determined everything, the complexion of your skin was almost as important as your lineage. To be pale was to be pure, untouched, and perhaps most importantly, rich. Peasants worked in the fields, their faces tanned and worn by the sun, while nobles stayed indoors, their skin shielded from the elements by heavy curtains, veils, and stone walls. Thus, beauty and privilege became intertwined, and the pursuit of paleness became a form of devotion to the ideals of nobility. Women, desperate to achieve that ghostly glow, turned to all manner of dangerous concoctions. One common recipe mixed vinegar with white lead, creating a paste that could be spread across the face and neck. The result was an eerily smooth, luminous look, but it also poisoned the skin, seeping into the bloodstream and causing fatigue, hair loss, and eventually death. Still, the danger was worth it if one could appear as radiant as the Virgin Mary in a church fresco. Some women even used arsenic water, despite physicians' warning of its lethal properties. Others dusted their faces with finely ground chalk or powdered bone. Beauty, after all, was suffering, and in the Middle Ages, suffering often felt like sanctity. The Church, ever influential, tied beauty to morality, preaching that outer purity reflected inner virtue. To be pale and unblemished was to be good and godly. To be tanned or marked by freckles suggested sin, lust, or manual labor. The ideal woman was not merely pretty, she was a symbol of spiritual cleanliness. Artists painted saints and angels with white glowing skin, and these images filtered down into everyday life as standards to be imitated. Women aspired to look like holy figures, and men were told to seek wives who resembled them. A flawless complexion was not simply attractive, it was a form of prayer. But beauty did not stop at the skin. Every feature of the face carried meaning. A high, broad forehead was admired, so much so that women often plucked or shaved their hairlines to create the illusion of one. A receding hairline was not a flaw, it was a fashion statement. Thin, arched eyebrows were preferred, sometimes removed entirely and redrawn with soot or ash. Lips were to be small and pale, the kind that could recite a psalm softly rather than shout a complaint. The eyes, too, held spiritual weight. Deep blue or soft gray eyes were said to reveal honesty and purity, while dark eyes could suggest passion, secrecy, or even witchcraft. Everything about the face was a code to be read, and beauty was the key that unlocked respect, marriage, and sometimes survival. The same rules applied, albeit more subtly, to men. A nobleman with pale, smooth skin was considered refined, someone who lived by intellect and breeding rather than by brute force. Tanned or scarred faces were linked to knights, mercenaries, and peasants. It was, in essence, an age that celebrated fragility. The weaker you appeared, the more elevated you were. This fascination with weakness and delicacy created an odd paradox. Beauty was something women were expected to possess, but not pursue. Vanity was a sin, so a lady had to pretend her beauty was effortless. A gift from heaven, rather than the result of hours of dangerous cosmetic rituals. To be too obvious about one's efforts risked condemnation or even accusations of witchcraft. Still, the art of quiet deception flourished. A noblewoman might say her pale complexion came from prayer and purity, while everyone around her politely ignored the faint scent of lead and vinegar that hung in the air. This quiet dishonesty was almost ritualistic, an accepted performance that allowed society to keep its illusions intact. Yet, for all its strictness, medieval beauty was not entirely joyless. There was a poetry to it, a strange, gentle kind of artistry in how people painted themselves to reflect ideals larger than life. Hair, for instance, was treated like a crown of holiness. Blonde hair was especially prized, thought to resemble the halo seen in religious paintings. Women who were not naturally blonde used creative, if foul-smelling methods, to change that. They soaked their hair in mixtures of saffron, alum, and pigeon droppings, then sat for hours under the sun to lighten it. The process left hair brittle and dry, but in a time before perfume, the sacrifice of scent was secondary to the glory of golden locks. In poems and songs, fair-haired maidens were compared to angels, their radiance a reflection of divine favor. Brunettes were not so lucky, often described as mysterious or passionate code words for dangerous. The association between lightness and purity ran so deep that even clothing followed suit. Pale colors, soft fabrics, and veils of white linen became fashionable among the elite. To be beautiful was to embody the very concept of heaven, not through strength or individuality, but through conformity and restraint. In private chambers, beauty routines could stretch for hours. Servants prepared face washes made from rosewater, milk, and crushed herbs, while others brushed and braided hair with combs carved from bone. In some courts, women slept with slices of raw meat pressed to their cheeks, believing it would soften their skin by morning. Perfume, when available, was used sparingly, a dab of lavender or myrrh to mask the scent of old cosmetics. The entire process was both intimate and theatrical, a private act of devotion to the public mask of nobility. Beneath all the powders and prayers, there was a clear message. Beauty was not about individuality, but about control. The church, the court, and the class system all dictated what was desirable, and people conformed out of both fear and ambition. A woman who defied those rules risked not only social ruin, but moral suspicion. To be too bold, too natural, or too sensual was to walk the fine line between lady and temptress, between purity and sin. Even men, for all their supposed freedom, were confined by image. A nobleman who appeared rugged risked being mistaken for common, while one who dressed too lavishly risked vanity. Every face and figure was a negotiation between what one was and what one was expected to be. And yet, beneath the layers of lead and lace, there was something profoundly human about it. All the timeless desire to be seen, admired, and accepted. The medieval woman, dabbing her cheeks with chalk, was not so different from someone today adjusting the brightness on a selfie. The tools have changed, but the longing is eternal. To be beautiful in the Middle Ages was to be part of a grand illusion, a silent agreement between faith, fashion, and survival. And as the candles burned low and the halls of stone filled with whispers, pale faces shimmered in the dark, each one carrying the same quiet hope that for tonight, at least, they looked like someone worth remembering. In the gentle glow of the medieval evening, when candles flickered against cold stone walls and music drifted softly from distant halls, beauty continued to whisper its strange demands. And nowhere were those demands more particular than in the upper half of the face. The forehead, that quiet expanse of skin between hair and eyes, became one of the most celebrated landscapes of the medieval world. To modern eyes, it might seem strange to think of a forehead as seductive or spiritual, but in the language of that time, it was a canvas of grace, a sign of intelligence, purity, and noble restraint. The higher and broader it was, the better. Women plucked or even shaved their hairlines to push them back, turning what nature had given into an emblem of refinement. A receding hairline that would cause panic today was then a mark of elegance. Court ladies would sit patiently while attendants plucked strand after strand from their temples. The pain endured in silence as a ritual of devotion to beauty. The effect, once complete, was ethereal. The wide, shining forehead framed the face like the dome of a cathedral, smooth, pale, and pure. Some women rubbed pumice stone over their skin to remove any fine hairs that remained, followed by a wash of rosewater or vinegar. If the smell of vinegar clung to the air, so be it purity often carried an odd fragrance. Eyebrows followed their own sacred rules. Heavy or bushy brows were unfashionable, considered masculine or unruly. Instead, the ideal was thin, arched, and nearly invisible, the kind of brow that hovered faintly like a shadow over the eyes. Many women plucked them completely and painted new ones, using soot mixed with oil or burnt clove. The curve of the line mattered deeply. A gentle arc signaled calmness and virtue, while a sharp angle suggested cunning or lust. Men, too, were expected to keep their brows neat, though not painted just enough to show refinement, but not so much that anyone might suspect vanity. Vanity, after all, was still a sin, and yet everyone committed it quietly. Even monks, writing moral sermons against female adornment, sometimes slipped into poetic descriptions of angelic faces and pale skin, betraying the fascination they publicly condemned. If the forehead and brows framed the soul, the hair itself was its crown, a shimmering symbol of status and sanctity. Long, flowing hair was prized above all, and in the imagination of poets, it became a living metaphor for virtue. Loose hair, however, was done on unmarried girls. It symbolized innocence and youth. On married women, it could be scandalous, a sign of temptation or carelessness. The church insisted that respectable wives cover their hair with veils or wimples, leaving only a suggestion of what lay beneath. These veils were often fine and translucent, allowing the faint golden shimmer of hair to glow softly in the candlelight, enough to suggest beauty without breaking modesty. For special occasions, noble women might braid their hair into intricate patterns, weaving ribbons, pearls, or tiny metal threads into the strands. The process took hours, often performed by servants whose fingers moved like artisans. Some braids were so complex they were compared to cathedral architecture, symmetrical, delicate, and built to impress God as much as men. Blonde hair remained the holy grail of medieval beauty, a color linked to angelic imagery and divine light. But since nature distributed blondes unevenly across Europe, many took matters into their own hands, or rather, into their concoctions. A popular lightning method involved soaking hair in a brew of saffron, alum, and ashes, then sitting for hours under the blazing sun. Some recipes even included horse urine, believed to enhance the bleaching effect. The results varied from golden to orange to outright disaster. But fashion rarely listens to reason. A medieval lady emerging from her session might smell faintly of barnyard and spices, but in the dim light of a feast hall, her shimmering strands could pass for heaven's own gold. In contrast, dark hair carried more ambiguous meanings. In some regions, it was praised for mystery and depth. In others, it hinted at moral danger, the kind of beauty that lured men astray. Artists painted Eve and Mary Magdalene with long, dark hair, one a sinner, the other redeemed, leaving viewers to decide which story they preferred. Head coverings were not only moral tools, but also aesthetic accessories. A well-draped veil could elongate the neck, soften the face, and lend an air of angelic serenity. Silk veils, imported from the East, were especially prized, though only the wealthy could afford them. Beneath those layers, women perfumed their hair with herbs, lavender, rosemary, or mint to mask the scent of the bleaching mixtures. Sometimes they sprinkled powdered rose petals or crushed cloves directly onto their scalps, a fragrant attempt to bring paradise to their daily lives. Hair was never merely hair. It was a quiet sermon on order and virtue, reminding everyone that beauty came from discipline. Men, too, followed hair fashions, though theirs leaned toward restraint. Short, neatly cut styles signaled dignity and control, while wild hair suggested recklessness or madness. Knights returning from crusades sometimes wore their hair longer to show experience and adventure. But once they re-entered courtly life, the scissors came out. Beards were trimmed close or removed entirely. Smooth skin symbolized civility and refinement. The tension between rugged heroism and delicate beauty mirrored the tension between sin and salvation. Everyone was performing, even when pretending not to. The forehead remained the stage for subtle expression. Artists of the time painted noblewomen with eyes downcast beneath luminous brows, foreheads gleaming like polished ivory. Chroniclers described queens whose whiteness of brow did outshine the moon, and poets compared the curve of a woman's temple to the arc of the heavens. These were not exaggerations for vanity's sake. They were the language of reverence. To look upon a beautiful face was, in a way, to glimpse divine ordura, human echo of celestial perfection. The fascination was spiritual as much as physical. In cathedrals, stained glass reflected colored light on the faces of worshippers, making every pale cheek seem to glow from within. The line between holiness and beauty blurred until they were almost the same thing. Still, not everyone could or wanted to meet these ideals. Among the working classes, practical beauty reigned. Hair was tied up to stay clear of tools and dirt. Veils were simple linen meant for warmth, not charm. Yet even there, echoes of noble fashion trickled down. A peasant girl might rub her cheeks with crushed berries on feast days, or plait her hair with wildflowers. Small gestures of defiance against a life measured in labor. Beauty, even stripped of luxury, was still an act of hope, a way of saying, I am more than my work. And perhaps that quiet resilience was its own kind of grace. When night fell and candles dwindled to stubs, those broad, shining foreheads and pale, veiled faces became ghostly visions drifting through castle corridors. Servants whispered about their mistress's rituals, about the strange potions and whispered prayers, about the vanity that was never to be spoken aloud. In the silence of stone chambers, the line between sanctity and self-adoration blurred like the edges of a dream. And as women lay their heads upon embroidered pillows, their freshly plucked brows aching, their hair still smelling faintly of saffron and smoke, they might have wondered, just for a heartbeat, whether heaven truly required so much effort. Yet by morning, when the sun filtered weakly through narrow windows, they would rise again, ready to repeat the delicate tyranny of beauty, the high forehead of virtue, the golden hair of heaven, the quiet promise that perfection could be worn like a veil, if only one endured the pain to earn it. In the dim glow of the medieval world, where sunlight filtered weakly through stained glass and faces shimmered beneath candlelight, beauty continued its quiet sermon, drifting from the polished curve of the forehead down to the subtle language of eyes, lips, and form. If pale skin spoke of purity and divine favor, then the eyes were believed to reveal the soul itself, twin mirrors of one's moral and spiritual worth. A medieval poet would tell you that a woman's beauty began in her gaze, and that the most desirable eyes were neither fierce nor bright, but soft and subdued eyes that promised gentleness, humility, and obedience. Blue eyes, in particular, were adored, thought to reflect heaven's own light, while gray eyes suggested wisdom and melancholy. Green eyes were rare, exotic, and therefore suspicious. They hinted at sorcery, seduction, or some wildness of spirit. Brown eyes, warm and deep, were admired in certain regions, but sometimes linked to sensuality rather than sanctity. The ideal woman, then, had a gaze that lowered more often than it met another's, for modesty was beauty's truest ornament. A lady who stared too directly risked being called bold, or worse, wanton. Artists painted their Madonnas with heavy lids and lowered lashes, creating an image that seemed to exist halfway between prayer and sleep. It was a look not of passion, but of quiet endurance, the kind that inspired devotion rather than desire. The lips that accompanied such eyes were expected to be small, pale, and composed, never too red or expressive. Crimson lips were dangerous. They spoke of temptation, of Eve before the fall. Subtlety was the standard. Women dabbed their lips with beeswax to soften them, sometimes tinting the mixture faintly with crushed rose petals or cochineal, though never so much as to look painted. To smile too broadly was considered unrefined. Laughter, though human, was treated as a slip of control. A beautiful mouth was one that held secrets, its corners turned not upward but inward, as if guarding something sacred. The poets of the court praised mouths that looked like a folded bud, and teeth white as ivory and small as pearls, though in truth few people possessed such luxuries. Dental hygiene was a distant dream. The The wealthy chewed herbs and rinsed with wine or vinegar, while others relied on mint or sage to mask decay. Yet even flawed smiles could be romanticized in verse, for the Middle Ages loved imperfection wrapped in poetry. A chipped tooth might become a mark of grace, a gap, a doorway of laughter. Beauty, in this sense, was as much imagination as reality, a dance between what was seen and what was believed. Below the face, the body told its own story, one written in silhouette rather than flesh. The medieval ideal for women was a figure that suggested fertility and gentleness, but never excess. A soft roundness was admired slenderness, in fact, could be considered sickly or unappealing. Full hips and a modest bosom symbolized health and motherhood, qualities prized in an age when survival depended on both. The waist, however, was to appear narrow, not through diet, but through the careful engineering of clothing. Layers of linen and wool, bound with laces or girdles, shaped the body into a smooth, flowing line. Dresses hung from the shoulders and widened gently at the hips, hiding imperfections beneath folds of fabric. The silhouette was not meant to display the body, but to idealize it, to turn flesh into symbol. Every curve, every seam carried meaning. The tapering of a sleeve could suggest delicacy, the drape of a veil humility, the shimmer of silk divine favor. It was less about seduction and more about order, the visible expression of a soul arranged in harmony with God's creation. Clothing played a crucial role in defining beauty because it controlled what could be seen. A low neckline, though common in some courts, was more about framing jewels and fabric than revealing skin. Lace, embroidery, and fine stitching drew the eye where the body itself was forbidden to show. Hands, however, were allowed their moment of quiet glory. Pale, slender fingers were adored, described in songs as white lilies upon a stem. Women rubbed their hands with honey and milk to soften them, sometimes dusting them with rice powder to maintain their pallor. Long nails were frowned upon. Practicality demanded they remain short and clean but smooth. Graceful movements were considered a mark of refinement. A lady's gestures were part of her beauty, and her ability to pour wine or lift a goblet without clumsiness could be noted in admiration. The ideal woman was not just beautiful in stillness. She was beautiful in motion, each movement deliberate, like the turning of pages in a sacred book. For men, beauty meant balance between strength and gentility. The broad shoulders and muscular arms of a knight were admired, but only when paired with grace and modesty. A nobleman who moved too roughly was no better than a laborer. Elegance distinguished the courtly from the common. Chivalric romances described heroes with shining eyes, golden hair, and fair-skinned warriors who looked more like angels than soldiers. The medieval imagination craved harmony, a balance between physical vigor and spiritual restraint. Even in battle, a knight was expected to embody poise, his armor gleaming like a second skin, his gestures controlled, his words few. Beauty for men was therefore a moral duty, a visible reflection of discipline and virtue. Color, too, shaped perception. Pale blue symbolized loyalty and chastity, while deep red hinted at passion and danger. Women of high birth chose their garments carefully, aware that a single shade could speak volumes. A lady dressed in blue silk might be compared to the Virgin herself, while one in scarlet risked scandal. Fabrics carried centrose water, sandalwood, or creating an aura of refinement wherever they moved. Even the sound of silk brushing stone floors could draw attention, a kind of whispering music that turned beauty into a sensory experience. Beyond the castle walls, peasants lived under different rules, but the echoes of noble fashion still reached them. On feast days and weddings, village women would braid their hair with ribbons, dust their cheeks with a pinch of flour for brightness, and wear their best homespun dresses. Their beauty, though humble, carried its own dignity. Men admired women who looked strong enough to work the fields, yet soft enough to hold a child. The church's teachings on modesty trickled through all classes, shaping a collective idea that beauty was not meant to provoke desire, but to inspire respect. And yet, desire was always there, unspoken, weaving its way through every glance and gesture, cloaked in the language of virtue. At night, when the feasts ended and the music faded, beauty returned to the privacy of mirrors, to polished metal at least. A noble woman might gaze at her reflection in the dim light of her chamber, tracing the outline of her face with a fingertip, wondering whether she had pleased the invisible judges of her world. Her hair smelled faintly of herbs and smoke, her skin powdered and pale. She might sigh, not out of vanity, but out of exhaustion, because maintaining perfection was a kind of labor too. Yet beneath the artifice and the arsenic, the plucked brows and laced gowns, there lingered a longing as timeless as humanity itself, the wish to be seen, to be valued, to be remembered. Medieval beauty, for all its rules and rituals, was never just about appearances. It was about belonging, about translating one's worth into the visible world. Pale skin, soft eyes, composed lips, graceful hands, each one a verse in a long, whispered prayer to be enough. And as the candles flickered and shadows danced upon the walls, perhaps those women, half angels and half mortals, knew deep down that beauty was never really theirs to own. It was something borrowed from the light, something they carried for a brief, shining moment before time reclaimed it, as it always does. In the grand halls of medieval courts, where echoes of laughter and lute strings drifted beneath towering rafters, beauty became more than an accident of birthlet, became a performance, a carefully rehearsed display of power and privilege. Every silk thread, every jewel, every motion of the hand told a story about status, virtue, and belonging. The nobility, forever locked in a dance of politics and display, understood that appearance was not vanity, was survival. The queen, the courtesan, the knight, the minstrel lech wore beauty like armor, a way to navigate the treacherous etiquette of court life, where a misplaced glance or mismatched color could unravel alliances. To be beautiful at court was not just to be admired, was to be noticed by those whose notice mattered. The medieval court, whether in Paris, London, or Prague, was a theater of elegance and rivalry. Gowns shimmered like liquid light, woven with gold threads that caught every flicker of candle flame, and perfumes filled the air with a sweetness so dense it almost masked the smell of sweat and politics. Courtiers practiced the art of movement, how to walk, bow, and even breathe with calculated grace. Beauty, in this rarefied air, was inseparable from performance. It was etiquette made visible. Fashion, in the medieval sense, was more than fabric, and fitted was a declaration. The church may have preached humility, but even bishops wore robes woven with gold thread and gems, large enough to fund a village. Colors carried meaning as clearly as any sermon. Purple, reserved for royalty, whispered divine authority. Blue, favored by noble women, suggested purity and grace. Red glowed with courage or scandal, depending on who wore it and when. For men, fine tailoring meant power. Cloaks lined with fur and adorned with silver clasps distinguished them from the peasantry, whose tunics were practical, rough, and colorless. A knight's armor might shine like polished dawn, but his true splendor came when the armor was set aside and he appeared in the hall. Hair scented with oil, his surcoat embroidered with his family crest, his belt heavy with ornamented metal. Every element was a signal, every accessory a sentence in the unspoken language of hierarchy. Among women, the stakes were even higher. A noble woman's gown could weigh more than 20 pounds, with layers of fabric draped and pinned to create the illusion of floating elegance. Her sleeves, long and trailing, would often brush the ground. A symbol of wealth, since only those who did no work could afford to have fabric that dragged in the dust. Bodices were laced tightly, shaping the torso into a slender column, while veils cascaded from elaborate headdresses, framing the face like a halo. The hen and the tall, conical headpiece, most associated with medieval fashion, was not merely a whimsy of style. It was a crown of social distinction. To wear one was to be seen as someone elevated, almost untouchable, as if one's beauty and grace extended toward heaven itself. And yet there was an irony in all this grandeur, for comfort was sacrificed to aesthetics. The fabric scratched, the metal ornaments tugged, the weight pressed down on shoulders and spine. Beauty, as ever, demanded a price at court. Even posture was political. A lady learned to glide rather than walk, to bow her head just enough to show respect, but never so much as to appear certain. Her smile was measured, her laughter timed to echo after others had laughed. Her hands, folded delicately, were instruments of subtle conversation. The flick of a fan or the turn of a ring could communicate flirtation, defiance, or disdain. The courtiers who mastered these gestures could command attention without a word, wielding their beauty as deftly as a knight wielded his sword. Men, too, cultivated elegance. They curled their hair, perfumed their clothes, and even painted their cheeks faintly for color. In some courts, men spent as much time before mirrors as women, preening and adjusting to ensure they struck the perfect balance between strength and refinement. To appear too rugged was crude, to appear too soft was suspect. The sweet spot lay in controlled perfection, where every detail seemed effortless but was, in truth, exhaustingly rehearsed. Music and dance were the lifeblood of these gatherings, and beauty found its rhythm there too. The slow, deliberate movements of medieval dances allowed participants to display grace without ever appearing overtly sensual. A gentleman's hand might hover just near a lady's waist without touching it, their steps tracing circles that mirrored the chivalric distance between desire and decorum. Courtly love, an idea, half born of poetry, half of longing, thrived in such settings, where beauty was admired from afar, elevated to something spiritual. Troubadours sang of women they could never possess, describing their golden hair, their pale faces, their voices that could melt the moon, and women, in turn, listened and smiled, fully aware of the power they wielded in that adoration. Beauty in the medieval court was not passive, it was an active force, capable of bending men's wills and shaping destiny. Cosmetics, though frowned upon by some clergy, were quietly used by those who could afford them. A bit of lead-based powder to pale the complexion, crushed berries for a faint blush, soot for the lashes, each applied with care, though never openly acknowledged. God made you as you are, the priests would thunder. Yet those same priests, blessed queens, whose faces were powdered to perfection, mirrors, became silent conspirators in this game of contradictions. The wealthiest nobles imported polished glass from Venice, marveling at their reflections with both vanity and guilt. To be beautiful was to tempt sin, but to neglect beauty was to risk invisibility. It was a paradox that every courtier learned to live within, and perhaps even enjoy. The clothing itself carried stories, family heritage stitched into coats of arms, secret symbols embroidered into hems. Lovers exchanged tokens sewn into sleeves or tucked into belts. A ribbon, a lock of hair, a gown could conceal messages, a jewel could carry poison. Fashion was not only beauty, was intrigue. To the untrained eye, a courtly gathering was a display of elegance. To the initiated, it was a battlefield of glances and symbols. Even the choice of fabric spoke volumes. Silk from the East, velvet from Italy, furs from the far north all told of wealth, trade, and influence. The woman whose gown shimmered with imported threads was not merely beautiful. She was a living map of the medieval world's ambitions. And then there was scent. Perfume was considered both luxury and necessity. In a time when bathing was infrequent, fragrances disguised unpleasant realities. Nobles carried pomanders, small, ornate containers filled with herbs and oils suspended from chains at their waists. The air around them became part of their allure. A man could be identified by his scent as much as his title. Lavender for virtue, musk for power, rose for romansta. Fragrances blended into a symphony of courtly identity. To be beautiful was to be remembered not only by sight but by presence. Yet beneath the splendor, the medieval court was fragile. Wars, plagues, and famine loomed just beyond the castle walls. Beauty, for all its artifice, was a defiance of chaos, a declaration that civilization could still hold itself together through order and appearance. When the world turned dark, people turned to gold and silk and song as proof that light still existed. A lady smoothing her gown before entering the hall was not simply dressing for admiration. She was armoring herself against uncertainty. In her reflection glimmered both pride and fear, both illusion and faith. And so the court continued its endless masquerade, spinning beauty into history, one candlelit evening at a time. In the candlelit courts and bustling workshops of medieval Europe, color was never a matter of mere taste. It was a code, a language of rank, wealth, and faith woven directly into fabric. Every thread, every shimmer of silk or dull scratch of wool whispered a story to those who knew how to read it. The world of the Middle Ages was painted not only in stone and parchment, but in garments that spoke louder than words. To wear blue, for instance, was not simply to wear blue, it was to declare devotion, virtue, and sometimes royal favor. The Virgin Mary's robes in church frescoes shimmered with that same deep hue, and so, by imitation, noble women wrapped themselves in it, hoping that a little of its sanctity might cling to them. But true blue dye, drawn from the costly woad plant or imported indigo, came dear. A single gown might consume months of a dyer's labor, soaking and drying, darkening by slow degrees until the color seemed to hold its own light. Only those with heavy purses and higher purposes could afford to walk bathed in heaven's shade. Red, meanwhile, blazed with meaning, love, war, sin, power. To wear crimson was to command attention. It marked the kings who led armies and the courtesans who ruled hearts. The dye itself, drawn from the tiny cochineal insect or from madder roots, was expensive, staining hands and fortunes alike. Yet despite its danger, or perhaps because of it, red never vanished from fashion. There was something intoxicating about its defiance. Something that seemed to say that even in an age of sermons and restraint, passion still had a place at the table. Yellow danced on the edge of favor and suspicion. It could mean light, warmth, the promise of harvest, but also betrayal. Judas, in many paintings, wore yellow. Still, some nobles draped themselves in soft shades of gold, hoping to claim the sun's generosity without its heat. Green, too, was ambiguous. It belonged to spring and fertility. But it also hinted at mischief, at fairies and forest spirits that decent folk were meant to avoid. A maiden in green could be innocent or dangerous. A man who wore it might be admired for youth or scorned for folly. Only the daring embraced it fully, their garments echoing the wild woods beyond the city walls. Purple, of course, was the color of emperors and bishops. Its dye harvested from seashells that had to be crushed by the thousands. To appear in purple was to announce that one's blood, if not divine, was at least close to those who claimed it. Peasants were forbidden by law to wear such shades, and even wealthy merchants risked fines for overstepping their station. The lines between classes were drawn not only in deeds, but in dyes. In this world, to wear the wrong color was to speak out of turn. Fabric carried its own dialect. Wool was the voice of the common folks, turdy, rough, and honest. Linen whispered of cleanliness and care, used for undergarments and summer wear. Silk, when it appeared, sang of faraway places, of caravans winding through deserts, of merchants haggling in crowded ports, of the mysterious East that seemed more dream than geography. To possess silk was to hold a piece of the wider world, to wrap oneself in wonder. Velvet was the fabric of ambition, heavy and lustrous, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, like power itself. The wealthy draped themselves in it during feasts, the soft folds catching the glimmer of gold jewelry and firelight. Even fur spoke volumes. Sable, ermine, fox-each pelt proclaimed a hierarchy of privilege. Sumptuary laws dictated who could wear what, ensuring that a duke could never be mistaken for a merchant, and that a merchant could never hope to look like a prince. Beauty, as much as status, was legislated for women. The layering of fabrics was both fashion and metaphor. The underdress of linen, cool against the skin, was a hidden comfort, while the outer gowns displayed the family's fortune. Colors were often paired symbolically, blue and white for chastity, red and gold for joy, black and silver for mourning. Cloaks lined with fur or embroidered with gold thread transformed the wearer into a moving tapestry. The hems of noble women's dresses were sometimes so elaborately stitched that they could take months to finish. each thread telling of patience, piety, or pride. These clothes were heavy physically and morally. They carried expectations as weighty as the cloth itself. When a lady entered a hall trailing silk behind her, it was not just a matter of fashion. It was a procession of identity, a statement of who she was and what she represented. Men, too, were not spared the scrutiny of color and cut, the shape of a tunic, the richness of a cloak, the gleam of a belt buckle spoke of rank and ambition. Knights favored deep reds and blues, while scholars leaned toward somber browns and blacks, signaling seriousness of mind. Even the church, which preached modesty, embraced the symbolism of fabric. Monks in coarse wool claimed humility. Bishops in embroidered vestments claimed divine right. Beauty, paradoxically, lived side by side with devotion. The same hands that stitched gold onto a robe might also clasp in prayer, untroubled by the contradiction. In the medieval imagination, color was alive. It had moods, temperaments, even moral weight. Painters and poets wrote of it as if it possessed its own spirit. To wear blue was to invite serenity. To wear red was to invite fate. Dyers, working in their dim, steamy workshops, were alchemists of the visible world, transforming drab cloth into radiant symbols. The process was messy and odorous, full of mystery. Urine, vinegar, ash, and plants mixed in vats that steamed like cauldrons. Apprentices stirred the brew with wooden paddles, their hands stained in shades that no amount of scrubbing could remove. The result, when hung to dry in the sun, was nothing short of magic, color drawn out of earth and fire, captured in thread. In those moments, even the humblest craftsman shared in creation. But beyond the dyes and fabrics lay a deeper truth. Beauty was performance, and fashion its stage. The nobles of the medieval world understood that what one wore could alter destiny. A marriage proposal could rise or fall on the impression of an entrance. A treaty could tilt with a well-chosen garment. Even the poorest tried to imitate the styles of their betters, saving coins for a bit of trim or a flash of color on a festival day. In those brief moments when the fields were forgotten and music filled the square, beauty ceased to belong only to the powerful. It became communal, a shared dream of refinement and radiance that transcended class. If only for an evening, and yet, for all its glamour, the language of color and cloth was fragile. Time faded dyes. Moths devoured velvet. A gown that once dazzled in candlelight might hang, years later, in tatters, its glory reduced to memory. But perhaps that was the point. The medieval world, with all its hunger for eternity, understood that beauty was fleeting, a reflection of divine creation meant to be admired but never possessed. Each brilliant hue was a glimpse of heaven, each shimmer a reminder that the world itself was a kind of fabric woven, bright and endlessly unraveling. In the hushed glow of candlelight, where shadows painted slow-moving silhouettes upon the stone walls, medieval beauty was not only something worn upon the face, but something that whispered through fabric, through folds of cloth and the careful arrangement of layers that spoke more loudly than words ever could. To the people of the Middle Ages, clothing was not just protection from the cold or the biting wind that drifted down from castle towers. It was a living language, a system of unspoken status and silent seduction. A lady's gown was a reflection of her virtue, her wealth, and her standing in a world built on hierarchy and ceremony. where even the smallest stitch might tell a story. Silks from Byzantium shimmered in halls that had never seen the East, and dyes from crushed flowers or rare minerals told of the distance and power behind the wearer's family name. Beauty was often measured not by the body alone, but by how that body moved beneath the weight of its attire, how the cloth caught the light, how the sound of its rustle could draw the attention of a passing nobleman or lady. The ideal female form was one that appeared tall, graceful, and almost impossibly slender, a figure that disappeared into long trailing sleeves and tightly laced bodices, where the faint rise and fall of breath beneath fabric could become poetry. Men, too, were trapped within this tapestry of expectation, their tunics and hose revealing enough to show strength, but tailored to reflect discipline and control. Color carried meaning. A deep blue could whisper of loyalty and faith. A rich red could boast of wealth and passion, while green was said to evoke fertility and the renewal of life. To wear black, the deep, velvety black, achieved only by expensive dyes, was to carry a quiet, dangerous elegance, often reserved for the mourning or the mysterious. And yet, in peasant fields and village fairs, the beauty of clothing was found in simplicity: coarse wool, unadorned linen, and the stains of honest labor that told their own kind of truth. The contrast between noble and commoner fashion was so striking that one could tell a person's place in society from a single glance, from the hem of a skirt or the fit of a sleeve. But what the nobles saw as grace, the poor often saw as absurdity. Imagine the lady of a manor, wrapped in fabrics so long and heavy that she could hardly walk without an attendant to lift her train, her head veiled beneath gauze that floated like mist. She would glide, or at least try to, across stone floors, appearing ethereal and untouchable, beauty as a kind of burden, elegance as a quiet performance. In contrast, the milkmaid or the seamstress might move freely through her day, her garments practical and modest, her hair uncovered and kissed by the sun, unknowingly embodying a different kind of beauty, one not written in noble books, but living in the rhythm of daily life. The standards of dress became even more complex when religion entered the equation. Church leaders warned against vanity, reminding women that modesty was a virtue. Yet the same cathedrals that condemned excess were filled with stained glass and gilded icons, beauty made divine. And so women walked the line between purity and display, wrapping themselves in fabric that both concealed and revealed. Even the shape of clothing was guided by faith: pointed shoes that echoed heavenward, high waists that elongated the form toward the divine, veils that mimicked the Virgin Mary's humility. The result was a contradiction the medieval world never quite solved. To be beautiful, one must appear both modest and magnificent, restrained yet radiant. It is easy to picture the quiet preparation of a lady before a feast: servants tightening her corset, arranging jewels upon her neck, brushing her hair until it gleamed like spun gold beneath torchlight. Every motion was slow, deliberate, and heavy with meaning, as though beauty itself was a ritual, not for herself, but for the gaze of others, for the approval of her peers, or for the silent admiration of a court she could never truly escape. In that world of candlelight and ceremony, even the smallest detail mattered: the stitching along a cuff, the cut of a neckline, the sheen of a ribbon, all became part of the tapestry of identity. A dress might weigh 20 pounds, but it also carried centuries of expectation. And the woman within it became both canvas and captive. The medieval world, for all its harshness, still believed in the spell of beauty, that through fabric and form, one might reach for something transcendent, something almost holy. And as we look back now, through the mists of time and the fading light of history, we can still feel the quiet hum of that longing, the desire to be seen, to be remembered, to be beautiful not for a moment, but forever, frozen in the folds of a gown that once shimmered like a dream beneath the stars. In the dim corridors of medieval castles, where the echo of footsteps mingled with the crackle of hearth fires, beauty was not simply worn, it was endured. Every standard that shimmered in the candlelight came with its own quiet cost. A pain accepted in silence, and a ritual carried out behind closed doors. The medieval woman, who might seem to us a figure of grace and mystery, often lived within a world of discomfort disguised as refinement. The pale complexion so prized by poets and painters was rarely a gift of nature. It was carefully manufactured through powders and tinctures that would make the skin fragile and ghostly. Women used mixtures made of lead, vinegar, or even ground bone, spreading them across their faces in pursuit of that cold, noble pallor that marked them as highborn. Beneath the illusion, the skin burned and cracked, but the mirror, or perhaps the polished surface of a silver basin, reflected only what society wished to see, the illusion of untouched purity. Beauty, in this age, was an act of devotion, almost a kind of faith, faith that suffering might bring one closer to an ideal that existed only in the imagination. And there were other torments, subtler and stranger. Eyebrows were plucked high to open the forehead, considered a sign of intelligence and grace, while hairlines were shaved to create a long, unbroken curve from brow to crown. Some even singed away stray hairs with heated irons, the faint scent of smoke mingling with perfume as vanity met fire. To maintain the slender form admired in noble courts, food was often refused or eaten in small, deliberate portions. There was no concept of dieting as we know it, but fasting, both religious and social, became a quiet form of control, a way to demonstrate discipline and piety while chasing beauty's cruel outline. The garments themselves conspired in this struggle. Corsets and girdles pressed against ribs, shaping bodies into fashionable silhouettes, while tight sleeves restricted movement and posture. Beauty demanded not comfort but stillness, and in stillness it found its power. To walk gracefully in such clothing was to perform an act of quiet endurance, a ballet of restraint in a world where every gesture was observed and judged. Even the sense of beauty were rituals of transformation. Perfumes were distilled from roses, lavender, and ambergris, the strange, waxy substance found in the bellies of whales, and these fragrances clung to hair and fabric, disguising the less pleasant odors of daily medieval life. But behind every sweet note was a hint of decay, a reminder that beauty itself was fleeting, that every moment of admiration was shadowed by time. Some remedies bordered on the superstitious. Manuals whispered recipes for clearer skin or brighter eyes, calling for crushed pearls, egg whites, or the dew gathered from meadows at dawn. Others leaned into the strange pigeon droppings to soften the face, or the blood of a dove to tint the lips. It was as though the medieval mind caught between faith and folklore, believed that the secrets of beauty could be coaxed from the world's most unlikely corners. And for men, too, the burden of appearance was no less demanding. Knights were expected to embody strength and chivalry, but also refinement. They oiled their hair, trimmed their beards with care, and wore perfumes beneath their armor, the scent of civility beneath the clang of steel. A well-kept appearance spoke not only of vanity, but of virtue, a sign that one's outer order reflected the order of the soul. Yet, the farther one reached for perfection, the more the pursuit began to resemble punishment. There were no salons, no gentle comforts of modern luxury, only dim rooms, rough hands, and remedies that bordered on poison. Still, they persisted, because beauty was not merely desired, it was demanded. To be plain was to risk invisibility, and in a world ruled by marriage alliances and social standing, invisibility could mean ruin. The medieval woman, painting her face by candlelight or tightening her laces before a feast, was not vain in the shallow sense. She was a survivor within the rules of her age. Her reflection was her armor, her silence, her weapon, and as she stepped into the hall, every gesture was a careful act of presentation. Every glance a quiet act of defiance against the passage of time. The pain faded into habit, and habit became history, leaving behind the illusion of effortless beauty that we, centuries later, still admire without seeing the cost beneath it. The truth is, beauty in the Middle Ages was never natural. It was carved, stitched, powdered, and prayed into existence. And behind every fair face in the illuminated manuscripts, behind every lady immortalized in verse, was someone who had endured the sting of vanity, the ache of tight fabric, and the quiet burden of being admired. In the end, beauty was not a blessing, it was a performance, and the stage was life itself. In the candlelit glow of medieval halls and cloisters, where parchment crackled beneath the hand of patient monks and painters ground pigments into dust, beauty began to take on another life, one that transcended flesh and fabric, living instead within the painted image, the carved statue, and the whispered poem. It is easy, perhaps, to think that beauty in the Middle Ages was merely an earthly concern. But to the people of that time, the human form was a reflection of the divine. To be beautiful was to echo the perfection of creation itself. And so art became the mirror through which these ideals were not only seen, but sanctified. The illuminated manuscripts, those small windows of color and gold leaf, often showed women with pale, flawless faces and high foreheads, their features serene, their expressions calm, not because this was how they looked, but because this was how heaven might have imagined them. Beauty was purified, simplified, stripped of the imperfections that made it human. In these images, hands were long and elegant, eyes cast modestly downward, mouths small and closed in eternal silence. Painters did not seek to capture reality. They sought to teach virtue through the illusion of perfection. The Virgin Mary was often the model, not just for piety, but for ideal beauty. Her skin glowed with an unearthly whiteness, her gaze soft and compassionate, her drapery flowing in curves that suggested both humility and grace. Artists took these divine features and, over time, began to imprint them upon every noblewoman, every lady of court who wished to be immortalized. The same composure, the same serenity, It became the language of beauty. But beneath the spiritual veneer, the human heart still pulsed with vanity and longing. The troubadours of southern France sang of courtly love, spinning tales of knights who adored ladies they could never touch, describing in endless verse their ivory skin, golden hair, and eyes like stars. Their songs were both worship and illusion, creating a kind of beauty that existed more in imagination than in reality. And perhaps that was the point. To love from afar was safer, cleaner, untouched by the imperfections of real life. The lady in the song never aged, never faltered, never spoke out of turn. She existed purely as an idea, and in that ideal, beauty became eternal. In sculpture, too, the same reverence appeared. Stone saints and angels gazed down from cathedral facades with the same stylized grace, the gentle tilt of the head, the subtle curve of the lips. Even when artists began to carve secular figures, they carried with them that holy geometry of form. A beautiful face, in stone or paint, was a kind of order made visible. Proof that the universe was balanced, that everything had its rightful place. And yet, there were cracks in the illusion, hidden in the margins of manuscripts, among the vines and beasts. Monks doodled strange faces, comical, grotesque, mischievous. Beauty, after all, had its opposite. And the medieval imagination was filled with reminders that ugliness and temptation lurked nearby. Every angel had its demon, every fair maiden her shadow. Artists painted these contrasts, not only to frighten but to teach. Beauty was fragile, and pride could twist it into something monstrous. The tension between purity and vanity haunted the age. Sermons warned that beauty was fleeting, that the flesh would wither, and that only the soul endured. Yet the same churches filled their altarpieces with visions of radiant saints. It was as if humanity could not resist the pull of loveliness, even while fearing its power. In this world of contradiction, mirrors were rare and precious. A polished piece of metal or the still surface of water might be the only reflection a person ever saw. To glimpse oneself was an act of curiosity, even of danger. Many believed that too much vanity could invite sin, that to fall in love with one's reflection was to fall, like Narcissus, into damnation. And yet, people looked anyway, drawn to the shimmer, to the confirmation that they existed and that their face, for a brief moment, could match the ideals they saw in art. In that reflection, art and life became one, imperfect, trembling, but achingly human. And so the myth of medieval beauty continued, carried forward by painters, poets, and the dreamers who believed that somewhere between heaven and earth there was a kind of perfection worth suffering for. The truth, perhaps, is that beauty was never really about appearance at all. It was a longing for order, for meaning, for a touch of the divine. The medieval mind, caught between sin and salvation, dressed that longing in silk and gold, painted it in tempera, carved it in stone, and called it beautiful. And even now, as the centuries fade and those faces blur into dust, the ideal remains quiet, haunting, unreachable, but forever gazing back at us from the mirror of time. In the quiet hush of medieval life, where dawn arrived softly through the smoke of hearth fires and twilight fell like a sigh over stone villages, beauty was rarely a spectacle. It was a whisper, a fragile secret folded within the routines of living. For the people who rose with the bells of the church and slept by the rhythm of the candles burning low, the mirror was not a daily companion, but a luxury, an object glimpsed perhaps once or twice in a lifetime. Most faces were known only through touch and memory. The young girl who washed her hands in a wooden basin each morning never truly saw herself. She felt the cold of the water, the roughness of her palms, the weight of her hair falling forward as she leaned toward the rippling surface. Beauty, to her, was something half imagined, half believed. It lived in the way others looked at her, in a compliment overheard, in a fleeting reflection caught in a pond. And perhaps that was the truest form of beauty, the kind that existed only when someone else noticed it. The veil became its symbol. To cover the head was to submit to faith and custom. Yet beneath the veil's soft fabric, something far older stirred, the power of mystery. When a woman veiled her hair, she did not erase herself. She transformed. Her features became suggestion and silhouette, her presence a question the world was left to answer. In churches, veils were thick and dark, swallowing the face in shadows of devotion, while in courts they were transparent, whispering of allure and refinement. The contrast told the entire story of medieval womanhood, purity and temptation, silence and song, devotion and desire, opposites woven together like the threads of the cloth itself. And when the wind caught a veil and lifted it for a heartbeat, revealing a glimpse of skin, the air itself seemed to pause, as though reminded that the divine and the human were separated only by the thinnest layer. But beauty did not belong only to noble women wrapped in gauze. In cottages and fields, it took a different shape. A peasant woman, her hands red from work, might pause at the edge of a stream, brush a strand of hair from her brow, and see her reflection tremble on the water's surface. She might smile, or she might not. Either way, the moment passed, and the image rippled away, carried downstream into forgetfulness. Her beauty was real but unrecorded. No manuscript, no poet, no painter would preserve it. And yet, in the grand balance of time, perhaps hers was the truer kind, unself-conscious, untamed, lived rather than displayed. The nobility sought beauty through performance, the poor through endurance. Both understood it as labor, though of different kinds. A lady's grace came from posture and restraint. A laborer's came from rhythm and necessity. The seamstress, bending over her work, her lips pursed in concentration, the faint light tracing her cheekbone, carried a serenity the bards never sang of. Beauty, in that world, was not so much seen as felt, an undercurrent that hummed through gestures, voices, and small acts of care. Even religion, for all its warnings against vanity, could not escape the spell. In monasteries, illuminated manuscripts glowed with faces so serene that even angels might have envied them. Painters and sculptors, working by candlelight, sought to give the invisible world a visible form, and in doing so, they humanized the divine. The Virgin Mary's veiled face became the model for all goodness, all womanhood, and so every real woman was compared against an image she could never truly match. Yet, hidden in that impossible ideal was comfort. If the Virgin's beauty came from grace, then perhaps one's own flaws could also be forgiven. Art and faith were mirrors facing one another, reflecting not truth but longing. In the glow of stained glass, colors fell across faces, both plain and fair, equalized by light. And as that light shifted with the hours, the same faces changed, sometimes holy, sometimes ordinary, always transient. As centuries turned, storytellers began to write about beauty in other ways. They described eyes like polished glass, lips the color of wine, skin pale as milk. But beneath those familiar phrases was an unease, the fear of losing it. The medieval world was obsessed with decay, with the rot of flesh, the turning of seasons, the crumbling of stone. To preserve beauty was to defy death itself. Some women slept with herbs under their pillows, believing the scent would keep their skin fair. Others drank from silver cups, thinking the metal carried purity. But time was patient, and vanity never won. Still, the pursuit continued, because beauty was more than surface. It was a promise, a whisper of eternity in a life defined by brevity. Men, too, wore their versions of veils, not of cloth, but of armor, of reputation, of chivalric pose. The knight polishing his helmet before dawn might see his reflection bend across the curved metal, distorted and strange, and wonder who he really was beneath it all. He was both warrior and dreamer, performing a role as rigid as any corset, as heavy as any brocade. In his silent discipline, he too became a portrait of controlled beauty, a harmony between strength and restraint. By the late Middle Ages, beauty had become a kind of theater, one that everyone played a part in, but no one truly mastered. The troubadours still sang, the painters still painted, and the poets still wrote, yet the faces they praised were beginning to change. A hint of realism crept in, wrinkles, tired eyes, the suggestion of thought behind the mask. It was as if humanity had grown weary of perfection and longed to see itself again. The veil began to lift, slowly, hesitantly, letting the world's rough edges show. And in those edges, something miraculous appeared: empathy, the realization that beauty could be flawed, that the divine could dwell even in imperfection. The people of that age may not have had the words for it, but they felt it in their bones, in their prayers, in the stillness before sleep. And so the story of beauty circled back to where it began, to quietness, to the woman by the hearth, brushing her hair in the dark, to the monk illuminating a page no one might ever read, to the wind moving through a veil, catching the light before disappearing into the silence of a stone room. In those small moments, beauty became eternal, not because it defied time, but because it accepted it. The medieval world, with all its cruelty and wonder, understood something we often forget: that beauty is not possession, but presence. It lives only while we notice it, and then it moves on, like smoke, like prayer, like the faint echo of a bell that once called people to worship in a village long vanished from the map. And if you listen closely, in that lingering silence, you can almost hear the fabric rustle, the candle flicker, the sigh of someone unseen, a reminder that beauty, even hidden, never truly disappears. In the grand courts of the medieval world, beauty was not merely admired. It was currency, power draped in silk and jewels, a silent language spoken between monarchs and messengers, between queens and courtiers. Every glance, every gesture, every shade of fabric whispered political meaning in a society where faces could change fortunes, and appearances could decide the fate of nations. The mirror, though rare and precious, held the weight of kingdoms. When a queen leaned over its polished silver surface and saw herself, the smoothness of her brow, the pallor of her skin, the curve of her lips, she was not simply looking for vanity's sake. She was searching for strategy, because in her reflection lived the image her enemies would judge, her allies would flatter, and her people would worship. The medieval world had no cameras, no portraits to circulate like gossip across oceans of time. And yet beauty was perhaps more scrutinized than ever. A woman's fairness could end wars or start them. Her smile could disarm a rival court. Her veil could conceal rebellion. And so, beauty became political theater. Queens learned to move with a grace that spoke of divine right, of holiness, of unchallengeable legitimacy. The tilt of a chin, the stillness of a gaze, could remind an entire room who held power not through words or armies, but through the quiet dominance of elegance. Beneath those layers of brocade and pearls, history unfolded one glance at a time in the royal courts of Europe, where banners hung heavy with dust and incense clouded the air like slow-moving dreams. Beauty was less about desire and more about order. The perfect queen was expected to be the earthly echo of heaven's purity. Her pale skin symbolized nobility, her delicate frame restraint, her silence virtue. Fairness was not just aesthetic, it was moral, an emblem of piety and grace. Pale faces meant indoor lives, lives untouched by toil. And so women powdered themselves with dangerous white lead to chase that ghostly glow of nobility. The poison seeped beneath their skin, even as it adorned it, but that did not matter. To look delicate, fragile, and pure was to look powerful. Those who lacked natural paleness painted it into being, and those born with it guarded it like treasure. Hair, too, spoke in secret codes. Golden locks were the envy of queens, but when nature denied them, alchemy provided. Women washed their hair in saffron and vinegar, or sat beneath the sun wearing linen soaked in herbs to draw out the brightness. Beauty in that age was a slow ritual of endurance, a devotion not to vanity, but to survival within the structures of appearance. For every queen knew her worth in the eyes of men was written upon her skin, her posture, her voice, and in the flicker of torchlight, as ambassadors from distant lands bowed before her throne. That beauty became a weapon sharper than any blade. Men were not immune to this theater of faces. Kings, too, cultivated their image as symbols of divine rule. They grew their beards in careful shapes, wore jewels that glimmered like stars, and posed in armor that gleamed even when no war was near. Portraits of rulers, though rare, were painted not to show likeness, but to show control. The medieval idea of male beauty was one of balance, strength without savagery, wisdom without weakness. The perfect king's face was serene, unmoved by passion, yet commanding in presence. When knights bowed before him, they were not bowing to a man, but to an ideal, the divine order made flesh. In this way, beauty and power danced together in endless circles. For the nobility, to appear beautiful was to appear rightful. To appear rightful was to appear blessed by God. And so even the act of grooming, of dressing, of standing still, became a kind of worship. The monarch's mirror was an altar, and the reflection within it a prayer answered through vanity. But beyond the glittering halls, among the rustle of straw beds and the hum of village chatter, people spoke of royal beauty with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The tales of queens with moonlit skin and kings with sunlight hair were stories carried from mouth to mouth, embroidered a little more with each telling. To the common folk, such faces belonged to another world, a world where people did not age in the same way, where clothes smelled of incense instead of sweat, and where every smile seemed rehearsed by angels. Yet there was fascination in that distance. The peasant's admiration fed the monarch's myth, and the myth, in turn, justified the hierarchy. Beauty confirmed what power claimed, that some were born to rule and others to serve. But time has a way of bending even the strongest illusions. Beneath the layers of silk and ceremony, human frailty always waited. The queen, with her painted face, still bled, still aged, still dreamed of youth lost to politics. The king, with his golden hair, still feared the gray beneath his crown. And sometimes, in the privacy of night, they would look into mirrors, too small to hold their grandeur, and see, not majesty, but loneliness. For beauty, when used as power, demands a constant sacrifice. The self becomes performance, and the performer forgets where the mask ends and the face begins. The chroniclers who wrote about these figures rarely mentioned such moments. They recorded beauty as legend, perfect, unblemished, untouchable. The ink of history smoothed away the wrinkles, softened the features, silenced the fatigue. Yet, occasionally, a forgotten note slips through. A monk describing a queen's melancholy eyes, or a court servant writing of a king who frowned often, as if weary of his reflection. These small cracks reveal the truth. Beauty, even divine beauty, carried weight. It was heavy to maintain, to protect, to live beneath. And perhaps that is why some of the most beautiful rulers in history were also the most tragic. They became prisoners of the very image that made them powerful. Still, the mirror never lost its hold. In it lay both judgment and hope, both fear and faith. To gaze upon oneself was to commune with destiny, to see not only the face the world adored, but the face time would one day erase. Perhaps that is why medieval beauty feels so distant, yet so familiar, because beneath the powdered skin and painted eyes, their fears were our own. The fear of fading, of being forgotten, of watching one's reflection drift away into history's dim corridors. But in that fading, there is also something deeply human, something that connects every queen and every peasant who ever leaned over a basin of water and saw herself looking back. The mirror, after all, reflects not perfection, but persistence, the fragile effort to find meaning in the fleeting, to make the ephemeral seem eternal. And so the beauty of kings and queens, wrapped in its politics and power, remains not as a lesson in vanity, but as a quiet confession of longing to be seen, to be remembered, to be real in a world built on performance. In the quiet, candlelit chambers of monasteries and workshops, where the air smelled of wax, pigment, and parchment, beauty began to take form not in flesh but in art, as if the medieval world, uncertain of its own reflection, decided to paint itself into eternity. The artist, hunched over a wooden table, worked by the faintest light, his brush trembling between reverence and fear. He was not merely painting a woman or a man, he was painting an idea, an ideal that hovered just beyond reach, a beauty meant to comfort the soul and discipline the eye. To paint a face was, in some small way, to challenge God, to imitate his creation stroke by stroke. Every line was a prayer, every color a confession. In those early portraits, the faces did not smile. They gazed forward with a serenity that felt almost supernatural, as though aware of their own immortality. The soft glow of gold leaf behind them was not vanity, but holiness, an eternal light that refused to dim. When a noble commissioned a painting, he was not asking to be remembered as he was, but as he wished to be, calm, virtuous, untouched by time's cruelty. And so, in art, beauty became a kind of immortality. While the living aged, their painted selves stayed still, forever young, forever flawless, breathing quietly on the walls of castles and chapels. As the centuries rolled on, art became the true mirror of society's shifting beauty. The sculptor's chisel echoed through stone halls like slow thunder, shaping cheekbones and curls into permanence. Marble was skin that never wrinkled, eyes that never closed. A sculpted face could hold a nation's pride, a family's legacy, a lover's devotion. Even when the real face beneath the inspiration had faded, the stone version endured, cold and patient. The medieval sculptors were both artists and mourners, carving not only likenesses, but ghosts. Their work was an attempt to stop the inevitable, to make beauty something solid, unyielding. And yet, despite their precision, something human always crept in. The slight softness of a lip, the tender curve of an eye that seemed to feel. It was as if the stone itself remembered the touch of the person it portrayed. In cathedrals, the saints and angels looked down upon worshippers with expressions so calm they bordered on melancholy, while gargoyles sneered from the edges, mocking the very perfection below. The duality of beauty and grotesque coexisted in the same architecture, because medieval art understood what we sometimes forget, that beauty has meaning only when shadowed by imperfection. The artisans who painted and carved were often anonymous, their names lost even as their works survived. They had no fame, no signatures, no galleries. Their reward was the act itself, the slow translation of mortal flesh into sacred image. In their devotion, art became a bridge between the earthly and the divine. A woman's portrait might hang beside that of a saint, their features nearly identical because holiness and beauty were intertwined. The Virgin's soft eyes, the Queen's gentle expression, the young maiden's downcast gaze, all became one visual language of purity. But this merging was also a kind of erasure. The individual disappeared beneath the symbol. Real women, with laughter and temper and age, vanished into archetypes. The artist's brush softened their humanity into something ornamental, as if the world feared seeing the truth of its own imperfections. Yet, even in those idealized images, a quiet defiance remained. A small dimple unplanned, a strand of hair out of place, a tilt of the mouth suggesting amusement, tiny rebellions that made the paintings feel alive and still. For all its holiness, art could not resist the lure of the physical. Patrons demanded portraits that flattered. They wanted their faces to glow like angels, their robes to shimmer like divine armor. Beauty became propaganda, each brushstroke a declaration of worth. To appear beautiful in art was to declare one's place in the order of the world, noble, chosen, favored by God. The poor had no portraits, no statues, no legacy carved in marble. Their faces existed only in the margins, literally. Monks, with a flicker of humor, sketched peasants and animals in the corners of manuscripts, rough and playful. These doodles were the only record of the real, imperfect faces of medieval life, wrinkled, sunburned, laughing, yawning. The margins of holy texts became the playground of truth, where beauty was not refined but raw, unfiltered, alive. And in those margins, perhaps, lay the purest art of all, the kind that did not care to impress, only to remember. As painting evolved, so too did the language of color and form. Blue became divine because it was rare, drawn from Lapis's mind in distant lands. Red spoke of passion and power, gold of sanctity. Every hue carried meaning. Painters spent weeks grinding pigments, mixing them with egg yolk or oil, crafting tones that seemed to glow from within. When they painted faces, they did not merely mimic reality. They revealed an inner light, a sense of stillness that invited contemplation. To gaze upon such a face was to fall into quiet thought, to feel time slow down. In this way, beauty in art became an instrument of peace. It lulled the viewer into reflection, into serenity. Even now, standing before those ancient portraits, one can feel the hush of centuries pressing in, the weight of countless eyes that once looked upon them. The paintings have outlived their subjects, their creators, their empires. They remain tranquil, luminous, untouched. But not all beauty in art was soft or divine. Some artists began to explore the opposite, the grotesque, the aged, the flawed. They saw in wrinkles a story, in scars a testament. They realized that perfection was not truth but illusion. Slowly, the definition of beauty began to shift. What had once been ideal became oppressive. What had been dismissed as common began to feel real. The art of faces grew more complex, more human. A portrait could now show sorrow, contemplation, even exhaustion, and still be beautiful. This quiet revolution, though subtle, marked the beginning of modern sensibility. The medieval world, so bound by symbolism and faith, had started to rediscover the simple wonder of the individual. And yet, even in that awakening, the old reverence lingered, the belief that beauty, however defined, was a reflection of something beyond the self. When we look at those faces today, the queens and knights, the saints and sinners, the forgotten artisans' sketches in the margins, we are not just seeing their beauty, we are seeing their hope. Their art was a conversation with eternity, a way of saying, "Remember us." And the fact that we still do, after all this time, means they succeeded. Their beauty lives not in the paint or the stone, but in the gaze that still meets theirs across the centuries. The medieval artists, in their devotion and discipline, captured something that no mirror could, the soul's quiet longing to be seen and understood. And perhaps that is the truest beauty of all, not the flawless face, but the eternal connection between the one who creates and the one who beholds. In the dim glow of medieval mornings, when frost still clung to thatched roofs and the scent of tallow candles lingered in cold air, the rituals of beauty began, quiet, deliberate, and often cruel. To look beautiful in that age was not an effortless blessing, but an act of endurance, a daily struggle waged against nature and time itself. The powders, the ointments, the tonics whispered of elegance, but beneath their sweet scents lay danger, slow and invisible. Women in castles and cottages alike smeared their faces with concoctions that promised purity, fairness, and youth, never knowing they were painting themselves with poison. Lead and vinegar, ground pearls, and arsenic dust, these were the alchemical secrets of beauty. Ingredients that glimmered in the hands of apothecaries who spoke in riddles. Pale skin, that fragile mark of nobility, came at the cost of breathless hearts and trembling hands. Those who pursued it too eagerly often faded before their time, their beauty stolen by the very remedies that were meant to preserve it. But still they continued, because beauty was not vanity alone. It was survival. A woman's future, her marriage, her security, even her safety, could depend upon how her face was perceived by others. In a world ruled by appearance, to be plain was to be invisible, and to be invisible was to be powerless. So the pain was accepted as ritual, the sting of the tonic, the itch of the powder, the quiet price of belonging. The obsession with skin ran deep, touching every layer of life. Pale faces, untouched by the sun, spoke of refinement, of wealth and purity. The peasants who worked beneath open skies wore their tan and freckles like brands of labor, while nobles sealed themselves indoors to keep their skin untouched by daylight. Curtains were drawn, parasols unfurled, and gloves worn even in gardens. To be pale was to appear divine, untouched by earth, closer to heaven. But such separation came at a human cost. The body, denied warmth and sunlight, grew weak, delicate, prone to sickness. Yet that frailty was admired too. A faintness, a cough, the languid droop of the eyes. These became fashionable, signs of gentility. The medieval mind, forever entwining the spiritual with the physical, saw in fragility a reflection of virtue. Strength belonged to men, softness to women, and suffering was seen as almost holy. In paintings and poems alike, the most beautiful women were those who seemed near death, glowing faintly as though halfway between this world and the next. Their thinness was ethereal, their stillness serene, their sickness almost sacred. The lengths to achieve such appearances were astonishing. Some bled themselves lightly, believing that pale skin was proof of purity. Others plucked their hairlines high upon their foreheads, using hot wax to remove what they considered crude or animal. A high brow was a sign of wisdom, a smooth one of grace. Eyebrows were thinned or erased entirely, eyelashes lightened to the point of disappearance. The goal was to look less like a person and more like a vision, a being refined beyond humanity. To modern eyes, it may seem strange, but in that world, beauty was the art of subtraction. The less natural a woman appeared, the closer she seemed to heaven. But beauty was not confined to the feminine. Men, too, participated in quieter ways. Knights polished their armor until it gleamed like moonlight, trimmed their beards to perfection, perfumed their hair with oils from distant lands. The fragrance of rosemary or rosewater was as essential as the sword at their side. A knight's appearance was his introduction, a symbol of honor and pride. To be well kept was to be disciplined, and discipline was its own form of beauty. Yet, even for them, the mirror could be a cruel judge. Battle scars told stories, but too many could tell the wrong one. The tension between ruggedness and refinement haunted the medieval ideal of masculinity, just as frailty haunted femininity. But nowhere was the cost of beauty more apparent than in the hidden chambers of alchemists and apothecaries. These secretive figures, part scientist, part sorcerer, concocted their potions under flickering lamplight. They promised transformations to lighten the skin, to brighten the eyes, to preserve youth. Their shelves overflowed with bottles of mercury, jars of crushed coral, vials of powdered bone. The ingredients of beauty and death were often the same. And while many of these remedies worked, they worked cruelly. The lead whiteners smoothed the skin but slowly poisoned the blood. Mercury brightened the eyes but clouded the mind. Still, the demand grew. Vanity was stronger than caution, and the world's most elegant faces were often its most fragile. In a sense, beauty became a form of martyrdom, a silent, slow devotion paid to the altar of appearance. And those who died young from their own adornments were remembered as tragic, beautiful, eternal, preserved in the very perfection that destroyed them. Even the tools of beauty carried meaning. Combs carved from ivory, mirrors framed in silver, brushes made with boar hair. These were not mere accessories, but symbols of order in a world of chaos. To sit before a mirror and prepare one's face was to impose control over the uncontrollable: time, aging, fate. Each stroke of powder, each twist of hair was an act of defiance. For peasants, the rituals were simpler, but no less sacred. A bit of lard on cracked lips, a sprig of mint rubbed on the wrists, a ribbon tied in clean hair. Small gestures that made them feel human in a life of toil. And perhaps their beauty, humble and fleeting, was the truest kind, because it was not bought with poison or privilege, but made from whatever life offered: sunlight, sweat, laughter, earth. They did not paint their faces to please lords or priests, but to recognize themselves, to feel alive within the endless repetition of days as years passed and generations changed. The pursuit of perfection only deepened. Recipes for cosmetics were passed down like sacred texts, handwritten in ink that faded but never disappeared. The same poisons were used for centuries, each era convinced it had mastered them. Beauty was a tradition, not of joy, but of sacrifice, a torch carried through time by those willing to suffer quietly for a fleeting glow. And yet, despite the pain, despite the danger, there was something deeply human in this endless striving. To alter one's reflection was to reach beyond the mirror, to try and touch something eternal. Perhaps the women who painted their faces in lead and the men who polished their armor until it shone were not so different. Both sought permanence in an impermanent world. Both tried, in their own way, to leave a mark that time could not erase. And maybe, in the end, that is what beauty has always been: not perfection, but the defiant hope that we might linger a little longer in the eyes of others before fading into history's quiet. As the centuries slipped quietly onward, the faces that once defined beauty began to fade, their features softening in memory like paint dissolving beneath rain. Castles crumbled, mirrors cracked, and portraits yellowed in the dark. Yet the idea of beauty, that fragile, persistent ghost, lingered, drifting through time like incense in an empty chapel. It haunted the old halls where tapestries still clung to stone, where faint outlines of queens and saints stared from walls with eyes long dimmed. Their beauty had once been an emblem of order, of power, of holiness, but now it was something else, a whisper from a world that no longer existed, a reflection that had outlived its subject. In the silence of forgotten rooms, it was as if time itself had become the true artist, painting with dust and decay, softening every line until only essence remained. The once smooth marble faces of angels were now rough with age, their perfection eroded into something almost human. In that erosion lay a strange new kind of beauty, one that did not dazzle or demand, but comforted. The past, in its fading, had learned gentleness. To walk through a medieval ruin was to feel it breathing still, the ghosts of its beauty stirring faintly beneath ivy and moss. The sunlight that spilled through shattered windows did not reveal perfection, but forgiveness, illuminating every crack as if it were a sacred truth. Perhaps the medieval world, in all its striving for divine beauty, had unknowingly built the foundations for this quiet grace, the beauty that comes not from control, but surrender, from letting time do what vanity cannot, make peace. The memory of those faces persisted in stories, though even the stories changed with each retelling. A queen once described as radiant became, in later verses, tragic. A knight once praised for his handsome valor became a symbol of pride's downfall. Time rewrote beauty into meaning. The poets who sang of fairness and grace slowly learned to sing of wisdom and sorrow instead. And the world's notion of loveliness began to mature. The glow of the skin mattered less than the light behind the eyes, the stillness of the pose less than the weight of the gaze. Even in art, painters began to show not ideals but emotions, a furrowed brow, a half smile, a tear unbrushed. Beauty became story, no longer a mask but a mirror of life itself. And in that transition, the medieval soul found its quiet redemption. The same world that once punished imperfection began to revere it. Scars became symbols of endurance, wrinkles, signs of experience, gray hair, a crown of truth. It was as though humanity had finally grown tired of chasing angels and decided to love itself instead. Yet, even in this acceptance, the echo of the old standards lingered, faint but persistent. The longing to be remembered as beautiful, to leave behind an image unmarred by time, remained. For in the end, beauty was not just about the face. It was about memory, about the hope that when we are gone, someone will remember us kindly, perhaps even tenderly, as something lovely that once was. The medieval people understood this longing deeply, though they would never have named it so. They carved their likenesses into tombs, not to boast, but to stay present. Their stone effigies, hands folded in eternal prayer, carried a serenity that life rarely afforded. To stand before such a tomb is to feel that strange duality of beauty, its stillness, its silence, its endurance. The eyes are closed, the lips soft, the body at peace. Death had become the final artist, smoothing away the imperfections, granting a calm the living could never achieve. And as centuries passed, moss crept over those faces, birds nested in their folds, yet the serenity remained. The beauty of the medieval dead is not one of youth or perfection, but of acceptance, the kind of beauty that has stopped fighting. There's something profoundly human in that stillness, as if the entire history of vanity and longing has finally come to rest. The faces that once wore crowns now wear dust, and in that dust lies equality. The noble and the peasant share the same quiet grace, their features softened into the same language of peace. Beauty, stripped of hierarchy, becomes universal at last. But beauty, even when forgotten, leaves traces. The recipes for cosmetics, the verses of troubadours, the stained glass of forgotten chapels, all of them carried forward into the modern world, reappearing in new forms, new obsessions. The medieval desire for pale skin returned in powdered wigs and porcelain faces centuries later. The longing for divine symmetry resurfaced in Renaissance paintings, in fashion, in photography. Every age rediscovers the same dream, dresses it differently, and calls it new. Yet beneath the surface, the same question lingers. What does it mean to be beautiful, and why do we ache for it so much? The medieval people chased beauty through faith, believing it to be a reflection of heaven. We chase it through filters and lenses, believing it to be a reflection of worth. But the feeling, the quiet hope, is the same: to be seen, to be cherished, to be remembered. And perhaps that is why medieval beauty, though ancient, feels familiar still. It speaks not of vanity, but of vulnerability, the timeless human wish to matter, even briefly, in the eyes of others. In the end, the echo of those medieval faces is not heard through the noise of history, but through its silence. It hums softly in the corners of museums, in the folds of old manuscripts, in the way candlelight still flatters a face, the same way it did 1,000 years ago. Beauty, though reshaped by centuries, remains what it always was: a fragile bridge between the mortal and the eternal. The faces of the past remind us that our own reflections are temporary too, that one day they will fade, soften, and become memory. But they also remind us that in that fading there is no loss, only transformation. The beauty that once existed does not die. It simply changes form, from skin to story, from face to feeling, from body to light. And perhaps, in that transformation, beauty finally finds its freedom. The candle burns low in the corner of a narrow chamber, and on the wall its light trembles over the polished curve of a bronze mirror that has seen 100 lives pass before it. A woman in linen once held it up to study the fairness of her face. A monk wiped the dust from it to glimpse the tired eyes of faith. A nobleman tilted it to adjust a feathered cap before some long-forgotten feast. And now it simply hangs there, reflecting emptiness and silence. Its surface mottled with age, but still capable of returning a ghost of light. In that quiet shimmer lies the whole story of how the medieval world saw itself, not as a collection of individuals, but as a mosaic of roles, faces arranged by rank and purpose. Beauty was never entirely personal. Then it was a language, a prayer, a code that spoke of virtue and divine favor more than vanity. When a lady gazed into her mirror, she did not ask, "Am I beautiful?" but "Am I good? Am I blessed? Am I seen as worthy in the eyes of heaven?" The mirror, so small and dim, carried the weight of moral judgment, and each reflection was a test of the soul. Even the act of grooming became a spiritual rehearsal. Combing the hair symbolized order against chaos. Washing the face meant cleansing the heart. Applying herbs or oils recalled the anointing of saints. Yet, for all its sacred pretense, there was still human longing beneath it all. A secret yearning to be admired, to be noticed, to be told that one's face mattered. Behind the chastity veils and holy metaphors, the medieval heart beat with the same anxious rhythm that ours does now, wondering how the world might remember it. Those who could afford mirrors owned only tiny ones, convex and imperfect, and in their warped reflections, beauty appeared both magnified and strange, reminding the viewer that flesh was temporary, that perfection belonged only to God. But that distortion did something unexpected, taught humility, and in humility, a new tenderness was born. Perhaps that is why so many medieval portraits seem oddly forgiving. their subjects painted not as flawless idols, but as people trying, failing, believing. Even kings were rendered with drooping eyelids and faint lines of care, as if the artist feared to flatter them too much, lest he challenged the divine hierarchy. Yet, in those imperfect depictions, we feel something warmer than admiration. It is as though time itself whispers through their gaze, telling us that beauty was never about symmetry, but sincerity, about the quiet dignity of simply existing beneath the same sky as everyone else. When night fell and candles were lit across the manors and cloisters, beauty shifted from the visible to the imagined. The flickering flame reshaped faces, turning every imperfection into mystery. Freckles became constellations, wrinkles softened into valleys of shadow, and the eyes, those medieval mirrors of the soul, glimmered like secret wells. Storytellers say that lovers would meet in candlelight precisely because it was merciful, because it let them see each other as they wished to be seen. The golden haze blurred judgment and magnified tenderness. Even the most self-conscious could, for a while, believe in their own radiance. In that light, beauty ceased to be a competition and became communion, a shared dream between two flickering flames. Perhaps this is what the medieval poets meant when they wrote of light within light, of seeing God through the face of another. For in those brief moments when the candle trembled and the shadows leaned close, all distinctions of rank and flaw disappeared. Everyone was equal before the fragile glow of mortality. Yet the same candlelight also revealed the passing of time, its wax dripping like hours, its smoke curling like memory. People of that age watched flame and face together, understanding instinctively that both would fade. So they began to paint and carve, to trap light inside pigment and stone, as though holding on to a breath. And that impulse, that aching wish to preserve, is why we still have their art today. Each portrait, each reliquary, each worn fresco is a mirror for us now, returning not their faces, but our own reflection of longing. The centuries have made them strangers, yet we lean toward them as toward family, because the desire behind those images has not changed. We still hunger for permanence in a world made of dust. If one listens carefully in the echoing halls of an old cathedral, the air itself seems to remember these quiet reflections. The play of stained glass on worn floors feels like the ghost of medieval candlelight, color replacing flame, but carrying the same tender uncertainty. Beauty here is not found in symmetry, but in surrender, the way the light accepts imperfection and still finds a path through it. Perhaps that is what the medieval soul meant to teach, that to see oneself clearly is to see oneself kindly, that even a warped mirror can tell the truth if the heart behind it is patient. And so the centuries pass, and the candle gutters, and the face that once leaned close fades into air, leaving only warmth behind. The mirror remains blank and waiting, ready for the next reflection to arrive and ask quietly the same eternal question. Somewhere beyond the edge of memory, where the sound of bells fades into the mist of forgotten centuries, beauty lies sleeping, not dead, merely resting, wrapped in the hush of time like a maiden beneath frost. The medieval world that once obsessed over fairness and flawlessness now exists only in whispers of parchment, in the hush of galleries where cracked paint still breathes. The faces that once turned toward sunlight have been swallowed by dust, and yet their stories hum faintly beneath the silence, like embers refusing to die. The medieval people never knew they were beautiful in the way we think of beauty. They believed themselves reflections of a divine order, fragments of something holy, and in that belief they found meaning. Their skin, pale or sun-browned, mattered less than the soul that animated it. But centuries later, we remember only the surface, the veils, the laces, the curls, the painted lips, the tapestries, heavy with saints and sinners. We forget the trembling hands behind the brush, the sigh of a monk at his desk, the girl combing her hair in a darkened room, hoping her reflection might show her not what she was, but what she might become. To them, beauty was prayer, disguised as vanity was the shape of yearning itself, the quiet wish to be seen, to be forgiven, to be remembered. In the long corridors of castles, the echo of footsteps mingled with the rustle of fabric. As ladies and knights passed, mirrors held at awkward angles, the faintest of reflections, allowing them to study themselves for only a moment before moving on. And yet that moment carried entire lifetimes of care, ritual, and strategy, because every glance, every tilt of the head, every adjustment of hair or sleeve communicated status, virtue, and refinement, and to misstep in appearance was a small tragedy that could ripple through court politics, alliances, and reputations. In the dim chambers, servants whispered advice on complexion, posture, and dress, sometimes recalling ancient recipes for beauty ointments or powders. Recipes carried over from mother to daughter, from one generation of nobility to the next. Each ingredient painstakingly gathered from distant lands, from crushed minerals, rare herbs, and sometimes dangerous metals. All of it applied with devotion and trepidation, because the pursuit of beauty was also a dance with mortality. Pale skin meant refinement, yet leaded powders poisoned. Mercury brightened eyes, but clouded minds. And yet women endured, patiently, methodically, believing that the reflection in a mirror, however temporary, was worth the risk. Meanwhile, men prepared themselves differently, their beauty intertwined with strength and authority, from polished armor to the careful grooming of hair and beard. Subtle fragrances applied to signal status and control, because even masculinity was defined as much by ritualized presentation as by the sword, and the medieval gaze judged all who crossed it, male or female, noble or common, according to the standards of the time. And yet beneath these formalities, in quieter spaces, the hallways, the gardens, the dim corners of candlelit rooms, the human longing for recognition persisted, soft and unassuming, showing itself in gestures that were unrecorded, in the brush of a hand across a mirror, the tilt of a head as if to see oneself anew, the whispered hope that the face before the glass might reflect not just social expectation but inner truth. And this yearning, fleeting as it was, carried across centuries because it is timeless. As the Middle Ages waned and the Renaissance rose like dawn after a long winter, the old ideals of symmetry, pallor, and divine proportion did not vanish overnight, but they softened, blended with the emerging appreciation for the human, the lived, the emotional, so that portraits began to reveal the eyes that thought, the lips that smiled subtly, the hint of life beneath the paint. And suddenly beauty was no longer a static badge of rank, but a dynamic mirror of experience. Still, echoes of the old medieval preoccupations persisted: the desire to be immortalized, to leave a mark upon the world, to create a reflection that would outlast mortality. And so painters, sculptors, and manuscript illuminators carried the twin burdens of artistry and memory, layering pigments, carving stone, gilding manuscripts with care, as if each stroke might stop time itself. And perhaps it did, for the eyes of the observer, centuries later, still find themselves caught in the gaze, seeing the long dead, understanding something about the longing to be remembered. Even the smallest objects, the mirrored bronze, the polished ivory combs, the delicate candle-lit reflections in a polished basin, carried this intention. Each detail selected not just for aesthetics, but for the promise of endurance, for the ability to whisper across ages, reminding future generations that the medieval world cared deeply for what faces revealed and concealed. And yet, while permanence was sought, impermanence remained, as the light of candles flickered, wax dripped, pigments cracked, and stones weathered, and the realization emerges that beauty is always ephemeral, a fragile liaison between the moment and memory, a conversation between observer and observed, a bridge between what was and what will never be again. The medieval obsession with preservation, with freezing fleeting faces in paint or stone, with powders and poisons applied with devotion, reveals a paradox that resonates even today: the desire to be eternal in a world defined by impermanence. And when we stand before the surviving art, the cracked fresco, the tarnished reliquary, we are not simply seeing a face, we are seeing centuries of longing, of ritual, of human attention, of quiet. The candle burns low, the dust settles, the centuries hum softly, and in that quiet, the truth emerges. Beauty was never about perfection. It was about connection, about being seen across time, about leaving an echo of the self that might survive the passage of centuries. Even as mirrors break, paintings fade, and stone erodes, the essence of that pursuit remains alive in us, because we too still lean toward reflections, still hope for recognition, still tremble at the flicker of our own candlelight. In the long twilight of the medieval dream, beauty slept not in oblivion, but in expectation, waiting for eyes to awaken it again. And perhaps that is the ultimate lesson of those centuries, that beauty, in its deepest sense, is not a possession, a standard, or a mask, but a story, a memory, a heartbeat that persists long after the world that created it has vanished, whispering softly across the ages that to be seen, to be remembered, to leave an imprint of care and longing, is the most enduring form of all. And so we honor it now, in quiet reflection, in the hushed study of art, in the awareness that those long-ago hands and hearts, their powders and pigments, their mirrors and carvings, continue to speak to us, reminding us that beauty, even when it sleeps, is never truly gone.